The second thing that I came to talk to you about is something you probably did not anticipate you were going to spend much time talking about here at Montfort. Lots of men normally don't talk much about it. And that topic is love. Are you kidding me, you're saying? We're going from the rifle range to talk about love? Someone's thinking that out there. This guy's definitely thinking that. Look, I've got my glasses on. I can see your thoughts, my friend. If you are thinking that, and I know you're out there, you're thinking that. If you are, you do not know what love is. So let's put some folks on display. What is love? What is love? No idea. Do you love your mother? How do you love your mother if you don't know what love is? It's an emotion. It's an emotion. What is love?
It's like a choice.
It's a choice?
Willing the best for another.
Willing the best for another. Hang on to that one. Go ahead.
Willing to sacrifice for another.
Okay. Willing to sacrifice for another?
It's also an act of the will.
It's an act of the will. Very good. In the back.
Chemical reactions of brain.
I'm sorry, say again?
The chemical reaction in the brain.
A chemical reaction in the brain. This is good. I'm glad you guys are participating. This is all very good. Go ahead.
It's it can be broken down into different types.
Can you name some of those?
Romantic,
Okay.
brotherly. Yeah, that's all I know.
Okay, fair enough. Different types of love. Good. Go ahead.
There's also like love that's you love like people without questioning. Love them unconditionally.
Okay, without questioning or unconditionally. Good. Anything else?
Well, why isn't all love unconditional? Because otherwise it's not love. It's just
Fair enough.
selfishness.
We've got a deep topic brewing over here. I'm not ready to, it's beyond the scope of this lecture, but I like where you're going with that.
There's also love of God.
Love of God, good. We touched on a little bit of love of God there. Actually, that was fantastic. I appreciate you guys participating. We got a lot of answers there that spanned the gamut. Some of which echoed a little bit of what the world tells us about love. It's not bad that you were thinking that. I don't fault you for that. We're certainly bombarded with it every day. Love is a feeling, love is an emotion, love is liking someone, love is romantic. There are certainly romantic types of love, but that's not what we're getting at. I don't want you to think like the world about love, about anything else. If there's any question, a good rule of thumb is don't think like the world. You'll probably be at least headed in the right direction. The world tells you all kinds of crazy things about love, but you are Catholic. You have the truth. Do not settle for some cheap imitation that the world will give you about love. It's a feeling, it's an emotion. St. Thomas Aquinas tells us, it was mentioned here actually a couple times, to love is to will the good of another. To will the good of another. That is, to intend, to decide upon, to act toward the good of another. And what is good for another? Heaven is the ultimate good. And then, so let's follow that line of thinking. To love someone is to help them get to heaven. That's exactly right. That is the ultimate good. That is the absolute best thing you could do for something. And it has nothing to do with liking that person, with feeling good about that person. You might not feel good about that person at all. You might be very angry at that person, and yet you are called to love that person. And one of the most loving things you can do in helping people get to heaven is to tell them when they're wrong. I'm sure you've seen people, not you guys, but I'm sure you've seen people do things wrong. You've been witness to this. Don't get drunk. Don't use drugs. Stop vaping marijuana or whatever else goes in a vaping thing. Stop doing this. Stop missing Mass on Sundays, on holy days of obligation. Stop disobeying your parents. You might not like to hear these things, They don't make you feel good. But if someone loves you and they're telling you that, they're not trying to make you feel good. They're trying to help you be good.
So you love?
Go ahead.
Just going back to what you said a little earlier, if that's all right.
Sure.
But if love is willing that good of another, is love of God an exception? Since you can't give God any more than He has. You know what I mean?
Right, so in other words, you're not willing what's good for God, is what you're saying?
Well, I'm seeing that's a little impossible if God all had. God is perfect, right?
Right, so you're not adding anything to God. You're not helping Him any, right? Would it not be, so a little bit beyond the scope of the lecture, I'll wade in amongst here, I'll get up to my neck. But are you not, is that not a form of self-love? Isn't that really what's best for you? Right? You're willing your own good to love God. But before I get too far, exceptionally far out of my lane, that is a good question. It's a good question. But back to what I was mentioning. So when others correct you, they are doing what's loving. They're not helping you feel good, right? It doesn't feel good, but they are helping you to be good, and that is infinitely more important. And when you see others doing things wrong, you should be correcting them. Oh, you say, not me, no. I just like to keep to myself, and they're not bothering me, I won't bother them. You know, live and let live, that whole thing. Just, it's fine, I'm good. So what you're telling me is you really don't love them very much, essentially, right? And you tell me, what you honestly expect me to love someone who does not love me? I mean, these guys don't even like me, these people who I'm thinking of. And I'm supposed to love them? Don't take issue with me, my friends. It's not my rule. Jesus Christ, second person of the Blessed Trinity, the Son of God, told us, love one another as I have loved you. And how did He love us?
He died for us on the cross.
He died for us. Have you seen a crucifix? That is a picture of His love for us. And that is what He is calling you and me to. Love one another as I have loved you. He died for us while we were His enemies, knowing full well from all eternity that we would offend Him. He still died for us. He didn't wait for us to say, okay, I'm sorry. And then He said, all right, now I'll suffer for you because you get it. No. He saw from all eternity everything you and I would do wrong, all the horrible things you don't even want to think about anymore, and He still died for you. That's the love you are called to, the love that I am called to. Go ahead.
So like, doesn't it also depend on your position in life? Like, if you're like an adult or something and you're doing like something bad and you know it's bad, but you're just like a kid, you can't go up to them and say, hey, this is really bad what you're doing. Because like, I don't want to say it would be awkward, but it's just like not right for you to be the one telling them.
Why not?
I mean, like, it would be rude, like,
Well, that's okay, so it's a good point. I'm not telling you to get up in people's faces and poke them in the chest and say, you're a sinner! Repent!
It almost seems like you're being a hypocrite, because you're also.
So then who is allowed to correct us for doing wrong? By that line of thinking, then only God can correct us, right?
But
Can you?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying like for sure, it just seems like you can't. I don't say you can't offend someone by trying to admonish them for doing bad things, but you also can't be like I don't know, like obtrusive to.
So there is definitely a point to be taken. There is definitely a way to go about doing it that will be received well. And there is no way for me to give you all the possible situations you could find yourself in, because as many men here, there are that many situations that you'll find, even more. Right? You are touching a little bit on fraternal correction, and you're not always obligated to correct someone. You're not always obligated to. And yet the point I'm trying to make, though, is that in loving someone, it's not feel-good happiness that the world tells you about. Loving someone, which is like what your parents are doing for you, they're correcting you. You're right, it would be a little odd for a child to, who doesn't have authority over someone, an adult, to correct them. However, I would say to you, depending on what the offense is, it might be perfectly acceptable for that child to say that, right? So to just spitballing here out of the air, you know, you're at a baseball game, you're there with your friends, and the old man next to you starts cursing up a storm. You are perfectly within your right to correct him, right? Now, what I'm offering to you is not, oh, when this happens, it'll be perfectly comfortable and everyone will agree with you and start doing exactly what you're saying. No, in fact, probably more often than not, they won't. Because again, you're not helping them to feel good, you're helping them to be good. And so it's probably going to be an awkward conversation, and you're probably going to be disagreed with. And yet, let's review real quick. Did Jesus tell us, love one another as long as they agree with you? As long as they're willing to do what you tell them? No. As I have loved you. Remember, he died for us while we were still his enemies, knowing full well that we would offend him in the most egregious ways. He didn't wait for us to say, yeah, I think that's a good idea, I'm on board, right? He loved us anyways. He loves us still that way. So yes, you are expected to love those who do not love you. You say, all right, I can get my head around that. You set the standard, right? The standard is the love that Christ loves us with. I get it. But come on, does anybody meet that standard nowadays? Seriously, we're not really called to love like that, are we? Well, let me tell you about a man named Emile. April 20th, 1916 was Holy Thursday that year. Emile Capon, K-A-P-A-U-N, Emile Capon, was born in central Kansas to immigrants from Austria-Hungary. He grew up a hard-working farm boy like all the boys of his age in a devout Catholic family, graduated from high school, went on to college in Missouri, entered the seminary in St. Louis, and was ordained a priest of God in June 1940. In addition to his parish duties, he was assigned as the auxiliary chaplain for the local Army Air Base in Kansas. And there he learned the duties of a military chaplain. And he felt drawn very strongly to that ministry. So much so that he petitioned his bishop to be commissioned in the Army Chaplain Corps. And his bishop allowed him to do it. He entered the Chaplain Corps in Fort Devens, Massachusetts, about 10 minutes or so from the Brothers in Still River. And he was sent at the tail end of World War II to Burma and India, where he spent the remaining years of the war. Upon the end of World War II, his bishop sent him to the Catholic University of America, where he earned his master's degree. But while he was there, he continued to be drawn to serving as a chaplain. And after he earned his degree, he petitioned his bishop again to enter the chaplain corps. And his bishop told him, no, I need you in the diocese, I need your work. And in obedience to his bishop, he took over as pastor in Kansas. And he continued to hear this call. And so after serving as pastor for some time, he petitioned his bishop again. And he said, I do very much love my work as a pastor, and I love these people. But I feel so drawn to serve the men in the Army, I would like to enter the chaplain corps. And his bishop agreed. And so in 1948, he was sent to Japan, where he served as an Army chaplain. And Father Capon and his men were the first to meet in battle the North Koreans who had come south and attacked South Korea and shocked the world. They were the first to meet him in battle. And he wrote to his bishop, quote, tomorrow we are going into combat. I have everything in order. All mass stipends, my will, etc. The way the Catholic soldiers are rallying around the priest is edifying, end quote. Well, in North Korea, Father Capon saw firsthand the horrors of combat. Hundreds of men wounded and killed. South Korean refugees leaving their homes. Stifling summer heat and mosquitoes. Cold rain in the fall and wet days. Endless loss of sleep, lack of food, and just general chaos and confusion in battle. And Father Capon earned a reputation on the battlefield of being fearless in ministering to his men and administering the sacraments. He prayed with the men in their foxholes. He offered Mass on a field expedient hood of a Jeep. There's a famous picture of him you can find online, offering Mass on the hood of a Jeep for his altar. That Jeep, by the way, was destroyed by enemy fire. So close was he to the front lines of the fighting. And he routinely risked his life to administer the sacraments to the dying, retrieving wounded soldiers and burying the dead, both allied and enemies. He was awarded a Bronze Star for valor for rescuing a wounded soldier from underneath withering machine gun fire. Why would he do that? For fame? No. In fact, he was none too happy when his hometown newspaper wrote an article about what he had done to earn the Bronze Star. He thought, I'm doing the job of a military chaplain. I don't really understand why you would call attention to that. He didn't do it for money, but for love. For real love. Father Capon, he loved his men, or his boys, as he referred to them. And he willed the best for them. He helped them get to heaven, even amidst the worst of earthly experiences. He loved his men for the love of Christ. His concern for them extended even to their families. For those who fell in battle, he would write personal correspondence to their loved ones, assuring them that when their loved one died, there was a priest by his side, and they received the last sacraments. Can you imagine how comforting that would be? After you're brokenhearted, you learn you lost your father, your husband, your brother, your uncle, your son. But to get a letter from the priest who said, I was there, and he died a holy death. That is love. As the war seemed to wind down and the North Koreans limped toward defeat, something unexpected at the time occurred. The Chinese entered the fighting. Father Capon and his men were again the first to meet the Chinese in battle when they were attacked by the communist forces at Unsan. Captured once, he escaped. As the fighting raged on, it appeared that the Americans were taking a beating, and the order was made to retreat. Father Capon refused. He remained to administer the sacraments to the wounded and the dying. Later the next day, he was captured, but not before he had witnessed a North Korean soldier attempt to murder a wounded American soldier, an unarmed, wounded American soldier. Father Capon rushed to the North Korean, knocked the weapon from him, and picked up the wounded soldier. In utter disbelief, the communists left them alone. Utter disbelief at the bravery he had just witnessed by this unarmed priest. He left them alone. Now the prisoners of war, if you can imagine, battle wounds, fatigue, starving, most of them, with frostbitten feet, were marched about 100 miles north to a prison in Pyeongtaek, near the Chinese border, over about a period of 2 days. Now, I don't know how many of you hike, but 100 miles in 2 days is hoofing it when you're healthy, let alone when you're starving, exhausted, when you're wounded and you have frostbitten feet. And as was often the case, men would fall out of the formation. And when they did, they would be left for dead or shot and killed. Well, Father Capon would not allow that to happen. When he saw the men start to fall back, he would carry them. And he would urge others to do the same, literally saving their lives. It's either you're going to get shot or I'm going to carry you. And all the while, keep in mind, he's suffering himself. He's not exactly in the best physical condition himself. At Pyeongtaek, he's placed in prison camp number 5. And there, his heroics continue. Up before the rest of the men, around 5:30, in 20-degree below winters, he would search through the camp and scrounge for firewood and sticks. he would find scrap metal, and he would fashion watertight canisters out of scrap metal, a technique he learned on his family's farm in Kansas. And he would use the sticks and the containers to purify water, to give to the men for drinking, to tend their wounds, and to clean their clothes, especially the men who were suffering from dysentery. You can imagine it's just a nasty, nasty job. Here's this priest, for love of God and for love of his men, doing this work. He volunteered for burial duty when they died, so that they could have a priest at their gravesite praying for them. He also prayed to St. Dismas, the good thief, when he went out against the rules after dark and scrounged for food for the starving men. In camp, the men were subjected to communist indoctrination. They were told of the futility of capitalism and of religion. Father Capon routinely, bravely refuted the atheists' claims. When mocked that God must not exist because he's obviously not helping the prisoners, Father Capon replied, quote, "God is as real as the air you breathe but cannot see, as the sounds you hear but cannot see, as the thoughts and ideas you have but cannot see or feel," end quote. Although forbidden, Father Capon led the men in prayer after dark, even praying for their captors. Imagine that. You're being tortured by communists, and here's this priest leading you in prayer for your captors, that they would be released from the grips of communism. He was known amongst the communists as a troublesome priest, and they were afraid to kill him for fear that the men would rise up in a rebellion. So much did they love their priest. On Easter Sunday in 1951, Father Capon reminded the men, amongst their own sufferings, that Christ suffered for them. This proved to be too much for the communist captors. And shortly after, Father Capon fell ill, and they saw their chance. Suffering from pneumonia and a blood clot in his leg, the communists burst into the barracks and insisted that Father Capon be taken to the hospital, which the POWs refused because they knew it as a death house. And they would not allow their priest to be taken, and they fought back as bravely as they did, but you can imagine they're starving, emaciated, exhausted, and they were overcome. And when they were overcome, they at least insisted that they escort Father Capon to the hospital. Broken-hearted as they were, he left them with a happy heart and a smile on his face, even as his body was broken. He told them he was going to Christ, where he was meant to be, and he told them he would continue to pray for them. In the hospital, he was denied medical treatment and died alone several days later. He was buried in a mass grave, and in 1953, as part of the Armistice Agreement, his remains, along with all the others with whom he was buried, were taken to Hawaii and buried in a mass grave in Honolulu, where they remained until earlier this year. Spring of 2021, Father Capon's remains were identified and returned to his home diocese. In 2013, he was awarded the Medal of Honor, our nation's highest honor for bravery, for his actions at Unsan. And yet, while I'm very proud to see that, a Catholic priest, and of the chaplains who have received the Medal of Honor, the Catholic priests outnumber the rest. I'm very proud to see that. And yet, somehow I think the medal wouldn't mean very much to Father Capon. At least as not as much as the eternal salvation of his men. So, you start your week at camp, probably don't want to hear much about love, right? That is love. Willing what is best for others, to will the good of another, as St. Thomas Aquinas tells us. Father Capon loved his men for the love of God. He kept up his POW's morale, which is no small feat. And most of all, he helped a lot of men to become good Catholics. As a priest, he administered the sacraments at great and grave risk to himself. He converted and baptized men who wished to become Catholic. So far-reaching were the effects of his deeds that after his death, a Jewish Marine Corps pilot who had been shot down was transferred to prison camp number 5, never having met Father Capon, but hearing his deeds from the other prisoners, stole scrap wood and fashioned a knife, a bit of an artist he was, and carved a 3-foot crucifix, a Jewish man. Carved a 3-foot crucifix in honor of Father Capon. That crucifix can be seen today. It's hanging in Wichita, Kansas, in a high school that bears the name of Father Capon. But even so, 70 years ago, I mean, is that too distant for you to relate to sacrificial love? If so, then I offer to you to look around this room. You see Father Becker in the back. You see these brothers, these slaves of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. They have given their lives for you, for your eternal salvation, to teach you to go to Jesus through Mary. That is love. That is willing the good of another. And that is the love to which you are called. So you'll have time definitely this week to enjoy camp, make some noise, and have fun. But you'll also have time to be quiet in the chapel and around the grounds. And I encourage you to listen for the Lord. Perhaps He's calling you to love others through the priesthood. Perhaps through the religious life, like the brothers. Regardless of your vocation, the Lord is calling you to love one another as He has loved you. Tell Him that you're ready to give your life however He wants you to serve. Tell Him that you love Him, and then go out and love others the same way He loves you. Oh yeah, and one more thing. Pray the rosary every day. Your mother said so. Thank you, gentlemen.